I pressed my eye to the crack and looked inside. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. It wasn't a room, it was a cell. And in the corner, on a dirty mattress, was a little girl. But she wasn't alone. There were others. Some were sleeping, some were staring at nothing, and one boy couldn't move because his eyes were open, but they weren't seeing anything anymore. Before we continue, like, comment where you're watching from, share, and subscribe. My name is Sarah, and I need to tell someone what happened before I lose my mind completely. It started 6 months ago when I moved into my dream apartment. Victorian building, high ceilings, amazing rent. Too good to be true, right? That should have been my first warning. The landlord, Mr. Henley, seemed normal enough. Quiet guy, maybe 60, always wore the same gray cardigan. He lived in the basement apartment and handled all the maintenance himself. I like to keep things personal, he'd say with this weird smile. The first month was perfect. Then, I started hearing the crying, always at night, always around 2 a.m. Soft, muffled sobbing coming from somewhere below my floor. I figured it was Mr. Henley watching sad movies or something. Old people do that, right? But then I realized the crying sounded like a child. I asked Mr. Henley about it casually one morning. "Oh, that's just the pipes," he said, but his hands were shaking as he fumbled with his keys. "Old building makes all sorts of noises." The crying got worse. Every single night now, lasting for hours. I started recording it on my phone, thinking maybe I was losing it. But no, it was there, clear as day. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, crying like her heart was breaking. I called the police. They knocked on Mr. Henley's door, talked to him for 5 minutes, and left. "No children in the building," the officer told me. "Guy lives alone. Maybe you're hearing the TV through the vents." But I knew what I was hearing. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The crying had been going for 3 straight hours. I grabbed a flashlight and went down to the basement. The hallway was pitch black, smelled like mold and something else. Something sweet and rotten. Mr. Henley's door was slightly open. I should have turned around. Should have gone back upstairs and minded my own business. But that little girl was crying, and she sounded so scared, so alone. I pushed the door open. The apartment was normal, too normal, like a showroom. Everything perfectly placed, not a speck of dust anywhere. But the crying was louder now, coming from behind another door at the back of the room. My hands were shaking as I turned the handle. The door opened to reveal stairs going down, wooden steps disappearing into complete darkness. And from down there, that heartbreaking sobbing. I started down the stairs, flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The smell got worse with each step. Sweet decay mixed with something chemical, like cleaning supplies trying to cover up something terrible. At the bottom was another door, heavy, metal, with multiple locks. But it was cracked open just enough for sound to escape. I pressed my eye to the gap and looked inside. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. It wasn't a room, it was a cell. Concrete walls, no windows, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. And in the corner, on a dirty mattress, was a little girl. She was maybe 8 years old, pale as death, wearing a pink dress that might have once been pretty but was now stained and torn. Her hair was matted, her cheeks hollow. She was rocking back and forth, crying those same heartbreaking sobs I'd been hearing for months. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice. She wasn't alone. There were others. 3 more children, all different ages, all in various stages of, I can't even say it. Some were sleeping, some were staring at nothing. And one, a boy who couldn't have been older than 10, was sitting perfectly still in the corner. He wasn't moving because he couldn't move. His eyes were open, but they weren't seeing anything anymore. I stumbled backward, hit the wall, made a sound. The little girl looked up, saw me peering through the crack. Our eyes met for just a second. "Please," she whispered. "Please help us." That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Well. Mr. Henley's voice drifted down the stairs. I was wondering when my curious little tenant would finally pay me a visit. I ran, pushed past him, bolted up those stairs like my life depended on it, because it did. I could hear him behind me, not running, just walking calmly like he had all the time in the world. "You can't leave now, Sarah," he called out. "You've seen too much." I made it to my apartment, slammed the door, turned every lock, called 911, screaming about the children, about what I'd seen. The police came, went down to the basement. The door to that underground room was locked tight. Multiple deadbolts. They demanded Mr. Henley open it. "I don't know what she's talking about," he told them calmly. "That's just my storage room. Haven't been down there in months." They got a warrant. Broke down the door. The room was empty. Clean. Just boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. No sign that children had ever been there. No smell. Nothing. "Are you on any medication, miss?" the officer asked me. "Sometimes stress can cause hallucinations, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard." That night, after the police left, I packed everything I owned and moved out. Didn't even wait for my security deposit back. Just loaded my car and drove until I was 3 states away. But here's the confession part, the part that makes me sick to my stomach. 2 weeks after I left, I got a call from my old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson from 2B. "Strangest thing," she said. "That nice Mr. Henley moved out the same day you did. Left in the middle of the night with a big moving truck. Didn't even say goodbye." She paused, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Oh, and Sarah, the new landlord found something weird when they were cleaning out the basement. A hidden room behind a false wall. Empty now, but there were these scratches all over the walls, little handprints, and someone had carved words into the concrete." My hands started shaking. What? What did it say? "Help us. Please help us. Sarah, if you can hear this, please help us." I hung up the phone and haven't slept properly since, because I know the truth now. I know what I saw was real. Those children were real, and I left them there. I ran away and saved myself while they stayed trapped in that basement hell. Mr. Henley is out there somewhere, with a new building, new tenants, and probably new children. And it's all my fault. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear crying. But now I know it's not coming through the walls. It's coming from inside my head. The screams of the children I was too scared to save. This happened 3 years ago, but I still wake up in cold sweats. My name is Marcus, and I used to work the night shift at Westfield Manufacturing. Keyword, used to. Let me tell you about Danny Kowalski. Danny was my work partner for 2 years. Good guy, quiet, kept to himself, but reliable. Always showed up on time, did his job, never complained. We worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, just the two of us in that massive warehouse. Danny had this routine. Every night at 2 a.m., he'd take his break in the same spot. This little alcove near the loading dock, where he could smoke and look out at the parking lot. He'd sit on this old wooden crate, light up a Marlboro, and stare into the darkness for exactly 15 minutes. I asked him once what he was looking at out there. "Just thinking," he said, "about things, about life." Danny was going through a rough divorce. His wife had left him for his brother. Yeah, you heard that right. And taken their kid with her. The guy was pretty broken up about it, but he handled it with dignity. Never badmouthed her, never got angry, just sad. That should have been my first clue something was wrong. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. Danny showed up for work like always, punched in at exactly 11:00, started his rounds. But something was off. He seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "You seem good tonight," I told him during our first break. Danny smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. "Yeah, man. I figured some things out, made some decisions. Everything's gonna be all right now." I was happy for him. Figured maybe he'd finally accepted the divorce, maybe started moving on. Good for Danny, right? Wrong. The night went normally until around 4 a.m. I was doing inventory in Section C when I heard this crash from the other side of the warehouse. Sounded like something heavy had fallen. "Danny!" I called out. "You okay over there?" No answer. I walked over to where the sound came from and found a stack of boxes scattered across the floor. But no Danny. His forklift was still running, empty, like he just jumped off and disappeared. "Danny, where'd you go, man?" I searched the entire warehouse, called his name until my voice was hoarse. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. But here's the weird part. His car was still in the parking lot. I figured maybe he'd gotten sick, called someone to pick him up, forgot to tell me. People do stupid things when they're not feeling well. So I finished the shift alone and reported it to the supervisor in the morning. Danny called in sick. The supervisor told me the next night, should be back tomorrow. Except Danny didn't call in sick. I would have heard the phone ring. There's only one line to the warehouse, and it's right next to our workstation. But whatever. Maybe he'd called the main office. The next night, Danny showed up right on time. "Where the hell did you go last night?" I asked him. Danny looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You disappeared around 4 a.m. Left your forklift running and everything." He tilted his head, like he was trying to remember something. "I don't. I was here all night, man. We worked together like always." Now I was confused. "Danny, you vanished for 3 hours. I looked everywhere for you." But Danny just shrugged and went back to work, and I started to wonder if maybe I was losing it. Night shifts mess with your head sometimes. Maybe I dozed off, had some weird dream. Everything seemed normal for the next few weeks. Danny showed up, did his job, took his 2 a.m. smoke break. But I started noticing little things. He never ate anymore. He used to bring a sandwich or leftovers from home, but now he'd just sit in the break room during lunch, staring at the wall. He never used the bathroom. In an 8-hour shift, most people need to go at least once. Danny never did. And he was cold. Not personality-wise, temperature-wise. The warehouse wasn't heated great, but Danny was always bundled up now, even when I was sweating. But the strangest thing was his smell. Danny used to smell like cigarettes and Old Spice. Now he smelled like nothing. Not clean nothing. Empty nothing. Like the absence of smell. I started paying closer attention during our 2 a.m. breaks. Danny would go to his usual spot, sit on his crate, and light a cigarette. But I realized I never saw him actually smoke it. He'd light it, hold it, and just let it burn down to the filter without taking a single drag. One night, I decided to watch him from inside. Turned off the break room lights so he couldn't see me, and observed through the window. Danny sat down, lit his cigarette, and then did something that made my blood freeze. He turned and looked directly at me. Didn't matter that the lights were off. Didn't matter that I was hiding behind a wall. He looked right at me and smiled. But it wasn't Danny's smile anymore. It was something else wearing Danny's face. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked up Danny's address and drove to his apartment. The building was run down, paint peeling, half the windows boarded up. I found his unit on the 3rd floor and knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. Door was unlocked. The apartment was freezing cold despite the October heat. All the windows were wide open, and there was this smell. God, that smell. Sweet and sick, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. "Danny?" I called out. "It's Marcus from work. You okay?" I walked through the living room, kitchen, down a short hallway. The bathroom door was closed. I knocked. "Danny?" Still no answer. I turned the handle and opened the door. Danny was in the bathtub. He'd been there for weeks. The water was black, and his skin was, I can't describe it, bloated and gray and wrong. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. On the bathroom counter was an empty bottle of sleeping pills and a note. The note said, "I can't do this anymore. The pain won't stop. I'm sorry." It was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. The night he disappeared from the warehouse for 3 hours. The night he came back different. I stumbled out of that apartment and called the police from my car. They came, took the body, investigated, ruled it a suicide. The coroner estimated Danny had been dead for about 3 weeks. But here's what I told the police, and here's what they didn't believe. Danny Kowalski had been showing up to work every night for 3 weeks after he died. I'd been working alongside a dead man, talking to him, watching him go through the motions of being alive. And whatever was wearing Danny's body knew I was watching. I quit that job the same day they found the body. Never went back, never explained to anyone why. How do you explain something like that? How do you tell people you spent 3 weeks working with a ghost, or something worse than a ghost? But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I wonder about that thing that was pretending to be Danny. Where did it go when the body was found? Is it out there somewhere, wearing someone else's face, fooling someone else into thinking everything is normal? And here's the worst part. The confession that keeps me awake at night. I think it knew that I knew. Those last few nights, before I found the body, it would look at me during our shifts and smile. Not Danny's smile, something else's smile. Like it was enjoying the game we were playing. Like it was proud of how well it was fooling me. And sometimes, I swear I can still smell that empty, nothing smell. Usually late at night, when I'm alone. Which makes me wonder, how do I know I'm not working with another one right now? How does anyone know for sure that the people around them are actually alive? My name is Jessica, and I wish I'd never taken that babysitting job. It seemed perfect at first. The Hendersons were this wealthy couple who lived in a massive house on Elm Street. Beautiful place, perfectly manicured lawn, the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens. They had 3 kids, Emma, age 6, Michael, age 8, and little Timothy, age 4. The parents traveled a lot for business and needed someone reliable to watch the children overnight once or twice a week. The pay was incredible, $200 a night, plus they'd stock the fridge with whatever I wanted and let me use their Netflix account. For a broke college student, it was a dream job. Mrs. Henderson interviewed me over coffee at their kitchen table. She was elegant, well-dressed, spoke in this soft, cultured voice, but there was something in her eyes that seemed tired. Deeply, bone-deep tired. The children are very well behaved, she told me. They go to bed at 8 p.m. sharp and shouldn't give you any trouble. Just make sure they stay in their rooms after bedtime. Of course, I said. Do they ever get up for water or bathroom breaks? Mrs. Henderson's smile flickered for just a second. No, they sleep very soundly. You won't hear a peep from them once they're down for the night. She paused, then leaned forward slightly. Jessica, this is very important. Under no circumstances should you go into their rooms after 8 p.m. Even if you hear something, even if they call for you. Do you understand? I thought it was a little weird. But rich people have their quirks, right? Maybe the kids were light sleepers and she didn't want me disturbing them. I understand, I said. Good. And one more thing. We don't discuss bedtime routines with the children. It's better if they think you don't know about the rules. The first night went perfectly. The kids were polite, quiet, almost eerily well behaved. They ate dinner without complaints, did their homework without being asked, and when 8 p.m. rolled around, they all said goodnight and went upstairs without any fuss. No bedtime stories, no requests for water, no 5 more minutes. They just went to sleep. I spent the evening watching TV and doing homework. Around 10 p.m., I thought I heard some soft bumping sounds from upstairs. But kids move around in their sleep, right? No big deal. The second night was the same. Perfect children, perfect behavior. But around 11 p.m., I definitely heard footsteps in the hallway upstairs. Soft, careful footsteps, like someone trying not to be heard. Then I heard a door creak open. I paused my show and listened. More footsteps. Then the sound of another door opening and closing. Kids getting up to use the bathroom, I figured. Happens all the time. But then I heard whispering. Soft, urgent whispering that I couldn't make out. Multiple voices. All the children talking at once in these hushed, hurried tones. It went on for maybe 10 minutes. Then stopped. Doors closed. Footsteps retreated. Silence returned. In the morning, when Mr. and Mrs. Henderson came home, I mentioned it casually. The kids were up for a little while around 11, I said. Just wanted you to know in case they seemed tired today. Mrs. Henderson went very still. Up? What do you mean, up? I heard them walking around upstairs, talking to each other. Probably just bathroom breaks and maybe some sibling chat before going back to sleep. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson exchanged a look that I couldn't read. You? You didn't check on them? Mr. Henderson asked. No. You said not to disturb them after bedtime. They seemed fine. Went back to sleep on their own. Relief flooded both their faces. Good, Mrs. Henderson said quickly. That's good. You did exactly right. But their reaction stuck with me. Why were they so worried about their kids being up for a few minutes? The third night, I decided to pay closer attention. Everything went normally until about 10:30. Then I heard it again. Footsteps upstairs, doors opening and closing, and that soft whispering. This time, I crept to the bottom of the staircase and listened. The whispering was clearer now. I could make out some words. She doesn't know. Have to be more careful. What if she comes up? Then we'll have to. The voices stopped abruptly, like they knew I was listening. I hurried back to the living room, but I couldn't focus on anything else. What were those kids talking about? And why were they being so secretive? Around midnight, I heard Emma's voice call down the stairs. Jessica, can you come up here? I had a bad dream. I started toward the stairs. then remembered Mrs. Henderson's strict rule. No going upstairs after 8 p.m., no matter what. "It's okay, Emma," I called back. "Just try to go back to sleep." Silence for a moment. Then, "Please, Jessica, I'm really scared." Her voice sounded different. Strained, like she was trying not to cry. What kind of babysitter ignores a scared little girl? I was halfway up the stairs when I stopped. Mrs. Henderson's voice echoed in my memory. "Even if they call for you. Even if they call for you." Like she knew they would. I backed down the stairs slowly. "Emma, honey, you're safe in your room. Just close your eyes and try to sleep." No response. The next morning, I asked Emma about her nightmare. She looked at me blankly. "What nightmare?" "You called for me last night. Said you had a bad dream." Emma tilted her head, genuinely confused. "I didn't call for you. I slept all night." That's when I started to get really creeped out. The fourth night, I came prepared. I brought a small digital recorder and hid it in my backpack. If something weird was happening, I wanted proof. At exactly 10:45 p.m., the sound started again. Footsteps, doors, whispering. But this time, I also heard something else. Scraping, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I turned on the recorder and crept to the bottom of the stairs again. The whispering was more urgent tonight. "She's getting suspicious. Saw her listening. Need to be ready. Tomorrow night." Then Michael's voice, clearer than the rest. "If she comes upstairs tomorrow, we do what we talked about." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my stuff and left. Didn't even wait for the Hendersons to come home. Just left a note, saying I felt sick and had to go. But I couldn't stop thinking about those kids, about what they'd said. So the next day, I did something stupid. I called Mrs. Henderson and told her I was feeling better, asked if they still needed me that night. "Oh," she said, and I could hear surprise in her voice. "Yes, of course. We'll see you at 7. I went back, but this time I had a plan. I acted normal all evening. The kids were their usual polite, quiet selves. At 8 p.m., they said goodnight and went upstairs. But instead of staying in the living room, I hid in the downstairs bathroom with the door cracked open. From there, I could see the staircase and hear everything clearly. At 10:30, like clockwork, the sound started, but this time, I saw them. The children came downstairs, all 3 of them, moving in single file, completely silent, except for that soft whispering. But here's what made me want to scream. They weren't walking normally. They were moving like marionettes. Jerky, unnatural movements, heads tilted at wrong angles, arms swinging loosely at their sides. And their eyes were completely black. Not the pupils. The entire eye, from lid to lid. Solid black like pools of oil. They gathered in the living room, still whispering in voices that didn't sound quite right anymore. "She's watching us. We can smell her fear. Should we go get her now?" That's when little Timothy turned and looked directly at the bathroom door. Directly at me. He smiled, and his teeth were too sharp, too many, like a shark's mouth in a 4-year-old's face. "Jessica," he said in a voice like grinding glass, "why don't you come out and play?" I bolted, ran out of that house like hell was chasing me, because maybe it was, got in my car and drove straight to the police station. "You have to check on those children," I told the officer on duty. "Something's wrong with them. They're not normal." The cop was patient, but skeptical. "Ma'am, what exactly do you think is wrong? How do you explain black eyes and shark teeth and puppet movements? How do you tell someone that 3 children turned into something else after dark? Just, please check on them. Do a wellness check." Make sure they're okay." The officer said he'd send a patrol car by in the morning. I never heard back from them. A week later, I saw in the local paper that the Henderson family had moved. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the house was empty, for sale, no forwarding address. But here's my confession, the thing that eats at me every single day. I think those things wearing the children's faces knew I was going to run. I think they wanted me to run, because 3 days after the Hendersons disappeared, I got a call from another family, the Ashfords, who lived across town. "We heard you're an excellent babysitter," Mrs. Ashford said. "We have 3 children and travel frequently for business. Would you be interested in a regular position?" The pay was incredible. The house was beautiful. The children were perfectly well behaved, and the rules were exactly the same. Don't go upstairs after 8 p.m., even if they call for you. I hung up without answering, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder about all the babysitters who said yes. All the girls who took those jobs, followed those rules, and maybe didn't run fast enough when the time came. And I wonder if those things that look like children are still out there, moving from family to family, town to town, always looking for someone new to play with. Someone who won't run when they should. Someone who'll come upstairs when they call. This is the hardest story I've ever had to tell. My name is Alex, and 2 years ago I had a roommate named Connor. Connor answered my Craigslist ad for someone to split the rent on my 2-bedroom apartment. Great guy on paper. Clean, quiet, paid his share on time, kept to himself mostly. He was studying computer science at the local community college and worked part-time at a tech repair shop. Perfect roommate. Right? For the first few months, everything was great. Connor was exactly what he seemed. Neat, respectful, minded his own business. We'd chat sometimes over coffee in the morning or while watching TV at night, but we gave each other space. He had this one quirk though. Connor was obsessed with privacy. His room had 3 different locks on it, a regular doorknob lock, a deadbolt, and one of those chain locks you usually see on apartment front doors. He'd installed them all himself. Trust issues, he explained when I asked about it. Had some bad roommates before who went through my stuff. Made sense to me. I respected his privacy, and he respected mine. But then I started noticing little things. Connor never got mail. Not bills, not packages, not even junk mail. In 6 months of living together, nothing with his name on it ever showed up at our apartment. He never had friends over. Never went out on weekends. Never talked on the phone. It was like he didn't have a life outside of work and school. And he was always watching me. Not obviously. Not creepily. But I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Studying my face like he was trying to memorize it. The first real red flag came when I got sick with the flu. I was laid up in bed for 3 days, barely able to move. Connor was incredibly helpful. Brought me soup, picked up medicine, checked on me regularly. But on the second day, when the fever was making me delirious, I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw Connor standing in my doorway. Just standing there, completely still, watching me sleep. "Connor?" I croaked. "Everything okay?" He didn't answer for a long moment. Then, "Just making sure you're still breathing. You were so quiet." He left without saying anything else. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd hallucinated it. Fever dreams, right? But I started locking my bedroom door at night, just in case. A few weeks later, I came home early from work and heard Connor in his room. But he wasn't alone. I could hear him talking to someone. I paused outside his door, trying to figure out if he had a friend over or if he was on the phone. But what I heard made my blood run cold. Connor was talking to himself. but he was using two different voices. "Need to be more careful," he said in his normal voice. "He's starting to notice," he replied to himself in a slightly higher pitch. "Not yet. Still have time. What if he figures it out? Then we'll have to move again. I don't want to move. I like it here. I like him." The conversation went on for 10 more minutes, Connor having a full argument with himself about me. I backed away from the door quietly and tried to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was rehearsing lines for a play, or practicing different voices for a video project. But deep down, I knew something was very wrong. That night, I researched Connor online, searched his name, looked through social media, tried to find any trace of him existing before he answered my ad. Nothing. Connor Davis didn't exist before 6 months ago. No Facebook profile, no Instagram, no Twitter. No school records at the community college he claimed to attend. No employment history at the tech repair shop where he supposedly worked. It was like he'd materialized out of thin air. I started paying closer attention to Connor's routine. He left every morning at 8 a.m., supposedly for school and work. But one day, I called in sick and watched from my window. Connor left at 8 a.m. like always. But instead of getting on the bus to campus, he walked 3 blocks, sat on a bench in the park, and just waited. He sat there for 8 hours. At 5 p.m., he got up and walked home. Same time, he always came back from his job. I confronted him that night. "How was work today?" I asked casually. "Good," Connor replied without missing a beat. "Fixed a bunch of laptops, helped some customers with virus removal." He was lying, had been lying for months. That's when I started going through his stuff. I know it was wrong, but I had to know who I was living with. When Connor left the next morning for his fake job, I picked the locks on his bedroom door. What I found inside still gives me nightmares. The room was completely empty except for a sleeping bag on the floor and a card table with a laptop on it. No furniture, no clothes, no personal belongings. Nothing. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of photographs, all of me. Pictures of me sleeping, eating breakfast, watching TV, getting dressed. Photos taken through my bedroom window from outside the building. Pictures of me at work, at the grocery store, at my gym. Some of the photos were dated from before Connor moved in. He'd been watching me for months before he answered my roommate ad. But that wasn't the worst part. On the laptop were dozens of files, all labeled with dates. I opened one at random. It was a detailed log of everything I'd done that day. What time I woke up, what I ate for breakfast, what clothes I wore, what TV shows I watched, what time I went to bed. Every single detail of my life, recorded and categorized. There were files going back almost a year, and at the bottom of the screen was a folder labeled Next Steps. I clicked it open. Inside were floor plans of our apartment, detailed notes about my schedule, and something that made my hands shake. A list of my friends and family members, with their addresses, phone numbers, and daily routines, and at the very bottom of the document, a single line. Phase 2, integration complete. Phase 3, replacement, ready to begin. I heard the front door open. Connor was home early. I quickly closed everything, slipped out of his room, and pretended to be watching TV when he walked in. "Hey," he said with his usual friendly smile. "How are you feeling? You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I managed. "Just tired." Connor studied my face for a long moment. "You sure? You seem different." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room with a chair wedged against the door, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police? But what would I tell them? That my roommate was taking pictures of me and keeping detailed logs? Creepy, yes. Illegal? Maybe not. Around 3 a.m., I heard Connor's door open. Soft footsteps in the hallway. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. The door handle turned slowly. Thank God I'd wedged that chair under it. The door pushed against the chair. Stopped. Pushed again. Alex? Connor's voice was different now. Flat. Emotionless. Alex, I know you're awake. I didn't answer. I know you went into my room today. I know you saw the files. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give me away. It's okay. Connor continued. I'm not angry. Actually, I'm proud of you. You're more observant than most of them. Most of them, but now we need to have a conversation about your future, about my future, about how this is all going to work. The door handle stopped turning. I'll give you tonight to think about it. But tomorrow, we're going to talk. And you're going to understand that running isn't an option anymore. His footsteps retreated back to his room. I waited until dawn, then packed a bag and climbed out my bedroom window. Left everything behind. My lease, my security deposit, my entire life. I drove to my sister's house 3 states away and told her everything. You did the right thing, she said. File a police report from here. Let them handle it. I called the police in my old city. They went to check on the apartment. Connor was gone. The apartment was completely empty, like no one had ever lived there. Even my stuff was gone. Furniture, clothes, everything. It was like Alex and Connor had never existed. But here's my confession, the part that makes me sick. Connor had been preparing to become me. I found out later that he'd been applying for jobs using my name, my social security number, my credentials. He'd opened bank accounts in my name, gotten a driver's license with my information but his photo. He wasn't just watching my life. He was preparing to steal it. And when I ran, I left him with everything he needed to do it. 2 months later, my sister called me, panicked. Alex, there's someone at my door. Says he's you. Says you sent him to pick up some things you left here. Don't open the door, I told her. Call the police right now. But when the cops arrived, no one was there. They did find something though. A note slipped under my sister's door. It said, tell Alex I'm enjoying his life, his job, his friends, his identity. Tell him I'm better at being him than he ever was. And tell him I know where to find him when I'm ready for the next phase. That was 2 years ago. I've moved 4 times since then. Different states, different names, different everything. But sometimes I get the feeling I'm being watched again. Sometimes I catch glimpses of a familiar face in crowds. Sometimes I find photos of my new apartment slipped under my door. And sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. When I answer, I hear my own voice on the other end, laughing. You can't run forever, Alex, it says. I know you better than you know yourself. I've studied every detail of your life, your habits, your fears. Then the line goes dead. I don't know if Connor was his real name. I don't know if he was working alone or if there are others like him. People who study strangers, learn to imitate them, then take over their lives completely. But I know he's still out there, and I know he's still coming for me. The worst part is, I'm starting to forget who I really am. After changing my name so many times, moving so often, I sometimes catch myself in the mirror and wonder if the person staring back is really me. Or if Connor won somehow. If maybe I'm the one who's become someone else. My name is Rachel, and I need to tell someone about Mrs. Gladys before I lose my mind. I moved into my dream house last spring. Small suburban neighborhood, tree-lined streets. The kind of place where people actually wave to each other. My house was perfect. 2 bedrooms, big backyard, reasonable price. The only downside was Mrs. Gladys next door. She was maybe 70, lived alone, and had this habit of watching everyone from her front window. Not unusual for an elderly neighbor, right? Lots of older people keep an eye on the neighborhood. But Mrs. Gladys was different. She knew things she shouldn't know. The first week I lived there, she brought over a casserole as a welcome gift. Sweet gesture, except when she handed it to me. She said, "I made it with extra garlic, just like your grandmother used to." I'd never mentioned my grandmother to anyone in the neighborhood. And my grandmother had died when I was 12, but yes, she always made her casseroles with extra garlic. "How did you know that?" I asked. Mrs. Gladys smiled. "Lucky guess, dear. You just look like someone who appreciates garlic." A few days later, she knocked on my door around dinner time. "Rachel, honey, you should eat something. You've been living on coffee and crackers all week." She was right. I'd been stressed about the move, barely eating. But how could she possibly know what I was eating inside my own house? "Thanks for the concern, Mrs. Gladys, but I'm fine. I worry about you, dear. Living all alone, working those long hours. You remind me so much of my daughter." That's when I noticed she was holding a photograph. Old, faded, black and white. She showed it to me. The woman in the photo looked exactly like me. Same hair, same face, same everything. Like looking at myself in a vintage mirror. That's amazing," I stammered. "We could be twins." "Yes," Mrs. Gladys said softly. "You could." She took the photo back, smiled, and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. The resemblance to that woman was too perfect, too exact. Coincidences like that don't happen. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Gladys started showing up more frequently. Always at the perfect moment, when I was feeling lonely, when I was struggling with something, when I needed help. She'd bring soup when I was getting sick before I even knew I was getting sick. She'd show up with an umbrella right as it started raining unexpectedly. She'd knock on my door with exactly the right tool whenever something in my house broke. It was like she could read my mind. "Mrs. Gladys," I asked her one day, "how do you always know exactly what I need?" "Mothers know these things, dear. But you're not my mother." She paused, tilted her head. "Aren't I?" That's when things got really weird. I started noticing that Mrs. Gladys was always watching my house. Not just casual glances. Intense, focused, staring. She'd stand at her window for hours, just looking at my front door. When I'd wave, she'd wave back with this strange smile. One evening, I decided to test her. I closed all my curtains, turned off most of the lights, and sat quietly in my living room. Within 10 minutes, Mrs. Gladys was knocking on my door. "Rachel, are you all right in there? You seem upset." How could she possibly know I was upset when she couldn't see me? "I'm fine, Mrs. Gladys. Just tired. Would you like to come over for tea? I hate thinking of you all alone over there." Something in her voice made my skin crawl. Too eager. Too needy. Maybe another time. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard something outside. I looked out my bedroom window and saw Mrs. Gladys in her backyard. She was digging. In the dark, in the middle of the night, she was digging a hole in her backyard with a shovel. I watched for 20 minutes as she dug deeper and deeper. When she was done, she went back into her house and came out carrying something large wrapped in a tarp. She dropped it into the hole and started filling it back in. The next morning, I almost convinced myself I dreamed it. But when I looked out my window, I could see the freshly turned earth in Mrs. Gladys's backyard. That afternoon, she came over with cookies. "I was baking all night," she said cheerfully. "Couldn't sleep. You know how it is." "Yeah," I said, staring at her dirt-stained fingernails. "I know how it is." A few days later, I was going through old boxes from the move when I found something that made my blood freeze. A photo album that had belonged to my grandmother. I flipped through it, looking at old family pictures when I stopped on a page near the back. There was Mrs. Gladys, 50 years younger, but definitely her, standing next to my grandmother at what looked like a church social or community event. They had their arms around each other, smiling at the camera like old friends. I called my mother. "Mom, did Grandma ever mention someone named Gladys? An older woman, maybe a neighbor or friend?" Silence on the other end for a long moment. "Where did you hear that name?" my mother asked finally. "She's my neighbor." She knew Grandma, apparently. There's a photo of them together. "Rachel, you need to get away from that woman. Right now." "What? Why?" Gladys Morton was obsessed with our family. "With your grandmother, then with me, and..." She paused. "I should have warned you. I should have known she'd find you eventually." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Gladys had this fantasy that she was part of our family. She'd show up at family gatherings uninvited, send birthday cards, Christmas gifts. Your grandmother tried to be kind to her, but it got worse over the years. My hands were shaking. "How much worse?" She started trying to replace us. She'd tell people she was your grandmother's sister, then later that she was my aunt. She had stories about family events she was never at, memories of things that never happened with her in them. "But why, after your grandmother died, Gladys showed up at the funeral wearing grandmother's dress. Said grandmother had left it to her in her will, which was a lie. She kept insisting she should move into grandmother's house, that it rightfully belonged to her now. I felt sick. We had to get a restraining order," my mother continued. But she kept finding ways around it. Different addresses, different phone numbers. The last time I heard from her was 15 years ago. What did she want? She said she was waiting, that someday one of us would need a mother and she'd be there. That night, I packed a bag and stayed at a hotel. I needed time to think, to process what my mother had told me. But when I got back the next day, I knew immediately that someone had been in my house. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But things had been moved, rearranged. My kitchen looked different, cleaner, more organized, like someone had been playing house. And on my kitchen counter was a note. "Welcome home, sweetheart. Dinner is in the oven. Love, Mom." In the oven was a casserole, the same kind my grandmother used to make, with extra garlic. I called the police, but what could I tell them? An elderly neighbor made me dinner without permission? That night, I heard scratching at my bedroom window. Soft, persistent scratching, like fingernails on glass. I looked outside but saw nothing. The scratching continued. It was coming from inside the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and went into my basement. In the corner, behind some boxes, I found a small hole in the wall, just big enough for a person to crawl through. The hole led directly to Mrs. Gladys's basement. She'd been coming and going through my house whenever she wanted. For weeks, maybe months. How long had she been watching me sleep? I ran upstairs and started throwing things in a suitcase. I had to get out. Going somewhere, sweetheart? Mrs. Gladys was standing in my kitchen. She looked different now. Younger somehow, her hair styled exactly like mine. She was wearing my clothes, jeans, and a sweater I'd been missing for weeks. "I've been taking such good care of you," she said. "Making sure you eat, watching over you, keeping you safe, just like a mother should. You're not my mother, but I could be. I should be. Your real family doesn't understand you like I do. They don't love you the way you need to be loved." She stepped closer. "I know everything about you, Rachel. Your favorite foods, your fears, your dreams. I know you better than you know yourself. Because you've been stalking me. Because I'm your mother," she said firmly. "I chose you. I picked this house for you. I've been waiting for you your whole life." That's when I saw the knife in her hand. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," Mrs. Gladys said. "You can accept that I'm your family now. Or," she gestured toward the basement, "you can join the others who wouldn't listen." Others, plural. How many holes had she dug in her backyard over the years? I backed toward the front door, but she was faster than she looked. Strong, too. She grabbed my arm with a grip like steel. "Don't make this difficult, sweetheart. I just want to take care of you." I broke free and ran, made it out the front door, screaming for help. Neighbors called the police. When the cops arrived, they found Mrs. Gladys calmly sitting in her living room, knitting. "Officer, I have no idea what that girl is talking about," she told them sweetly. "She's been acting very strange lately. I'm worried about her mental health." The tunnel between our basements? Boarded up, no sign it had ever existed. The knife? Nowhere to be found. The note she'd left? Gone. But they did search her backyard. They found 6 bodies. All women, all in their 20s or 30s. All who looked remarkably similar to each other. All who looked like me. Mrs. Gladys, whose real name turned out to be Gladys Morton, had been doing this for decades. Moving to new neighborhoods, finding young women who fit a certain profile, inserting herself into their lives as the perfect neighbor. When they wouldn't accept her as family, she made sure they couldn't reject her anymore. During the trial, the prosecutor asked her why. "Every mother needs a daughter," she said simply. "I was just looking for the right one. She's in prison now." Life sentence? No possibility of parole. But here's my confession, the part that keeps me awake at night. Sometimes I miss her. Not the stalking, not the murder attempts, not the insanity. But she was right about one thing. She did take care of me. Better than anyone else ever had. She remembered every little detail about what I liked, what I needed, what made me happy. And in those moments when I'm feeling lonely, when I'm struggling, when I wish someone cared enough to just check on me, I think about Mrs. Gladys. And I understand, just a little bit, how the other women fell for it. How they let her get so close before they realized what she really wanted. Because sometimes, the most dangerous monsters are the ones who offer us exactly what we need, even when the price is everything we are. This is the last story, and it's the one that happened most recently. My name is David, and I work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. It's not a great job, but it pays the bills. Quiet most nights, just truckers and insomniacs stopping for coffee and cigarettes. I work alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which suits me fine. I'm not much of a people person. 3 months ago, my manager told me they were hiring a second night shift worker. Getting too many complaints about long wait times, he explained. Need someone to help with restocking and cleaning while you handle the register. The new guy's name was Thomas. Mid-30s, average height, forgettable face. The kind of person you'd pass on the street and not remember 5 minutes later, which should have been my first warning. Thomas was perfect. Too perfect. He showed up exactly on time every night. Never called in sick, never complained, never asked to leave early. He did whatever needed doing without being asked. Restocked shelves, cleaned bathrooms, mopped floors. He was polite, but quiet. Didn't talk much unless spoken to. And when he did talk, it was always appropriate. Never told jokes, never shared personal stories, never seemed to have opinions about anything. "How was your weekend?" I'd ask. "It was fine," he'd say. "Got any plans for your day off?" Nothing special. Every conversation was like that, pleasant but empty, like talking to a friendly robot. At first, I appreciated having such an easy coworker. No drama, no personality conflicts, no having to pretend we were friends. Just two guys doing their jobs. But after a few weeks, I started noticing things. Thomas never ate. In 8 hours, most people grab a snack or drink something. Thomas never touched the food or beverages in the store. Never brought anything from home. I never even saw him drink water. He never used the bathroom. Not once in 2 months of working together. And he never seemed tired, even during the dead hours between 3 and 5 a.m. when most people start dragging. Thomas was always alert, always focused, like he'd just clocked in. "Don't you ever get tired?" I asked him one night. "Not really," he said. "I'm used to these hours. How long have you been working nights?" Thomas paused for just a second too long. "A while." "Where did you work before this?" Another pause. "Different places." It was like pulling teeth to get any real information out of him. And when I thought about it, I realized I knew nothing about Thomas beyond his first name. He'd never mentioned family, friends, hobbies, where he lived, what he did during the day. Nothing. One night, around 2 a.m., I was in the back room doing inventory when I heard the front door chime. I waited for Thomas to greet the customer, but didn't hear any voices. I poked my head out and saw Thomas standing behind the counter, staring at nothing. The store was empty. "Did someone come in?" I asked. Thomas blinked, like he was coming out of a trance. "What?" I heard the door chime. He looked around the store, confused. "I don't think so. Maybe it was just the wind." But there was no wind that night. That's when I started paying closer attention. Over the next few nights, I caught Thomas doing strange things when he thought I wasn't watching. He'd stand perfectly still for long periods, just staring at the wall or out the window. Not daydreaming. Staring. Like he was seeing something I couldn't see. When he restocked shelves, he'd organize everything by exact height and spacing, measuring with his fingers to make sure each item was perfectly aligned. It took forever, but the result was unnaturally precise. And sometimes, when a customer came in, Thomas would watch them with this intense focus. Not suspicious security guard watching something else. Like he was studying them, memorizing every detail of how they moved and spoke. One night, a regular customer named Pete came in. Pete was a trucker who stopped by every Tuesday around midnight for coffee and cigarettes. He always chatted with me about his route, his family, whatever was on his mind. When Pete walked up to the counter, Thomas was there instead of me. "Evening, Pete," Thomas said. "The usual? Large coffee, black, and a pack of Marlboro Reds?" Pete looked surprised. "Yeah, that's right. Do I know you?" "I'm Thomas. I've seen you come in before." "Huh. Don't remember meeting you, but my memory ain't what it used to be." Pete laughed. "You must pay attention to your customers." "I try to," Thomas said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But here's the thing. Thomas had never worked the register when Pete came in before. He'd always been in the back room or cleaning somewhere else in the store. There was no way he could know Pete's usual order, unless he'd been watching, listening to every conversation I'd had with Pete over the months. I started testing him. "That new customer last week was interesting," I'd say casually. "Which one?" Thomas would ask. "The woman with the red hair." said she was moving to Florida. Thomas would nod. I remember her, but there hadn't been any woman with red hair. I was making it up, and Thomas always remembered them. Every fake customer I invented, every made-up conversation, Thomas would play along like he'd been there for all of it, like he was trying to convince me he belonged. That's when I decided to do some investigating. I asked my manager about Thomas's employment history, his references, his application. Funny thing about that, my manager said. I could have sworn I interviewed him, but I can't find any paperwork. No application, no resume, no references. It's like he just started working here. How is that possible? I don't know. Maybe the paperwork got lost. Maybe I forgot to file it. But he's a good worker, so I'm not worried about it. I called the corporate office, asked them to look up Thomas in their system. No record of him, no employee ID, no payroll information, no background check. According to the computer, Thomas didn't exist, but he was getting paid somehow because he kept showing up for work. That's when I realized I'd never actually seen Thomas leave the building. Every morning at 7 a.m., my replacement would arrive and I'd head home. I'd say goodbye to Thomas, walk to my car, and drive away. But I'd never actually seen him leave. So one morning, I pretended to leave, but parked around the corner where I could watch the gas station. My replacement went inside. I waited for Thomas to come out. He never did. I waited for 2 hours. Cars came and went. Customers went in and out. But Thomas never left the building. Finally, I drove back and went inside. Where's Thomas? I asked my replacement, Jake. Who's Thomas? Jake said. My coworker, night shift guy. He should have just gotten off. Jake looked confused. Dude, you work nights alone. Always have. I stared at him. Are you serious? Thomas has been working with me for 2 months. I don't know anyone named Thomas. And corporate only pays for one person on nights. I showed Jake the schedule posted in the back room. It showed 2 people assigned to night shift, me and Thomas. Jake looked at the schedule, then looked at me like I was crazy. Dave, this schedule only shows you. There's no Thomas on here. I looked at the schedule again. He was right. Only my name was there. But I could have sworn. I remembered seeing Thomas's name there. I remembered my manager telling me about hiring a second person. Maybe I'm just tired, I said. But that night, Thomas showed up for work, like always. How was your morning? He asked pleasantly. I stared at him. According to everyone else, he didn't exist. But he was right there, solid and real, and asking about my morning. Thomas, I said carefully, how long have you been working here? He tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean, what's today's date? Thomas stared at me for a long moment. I'm not sure I understand the question. The date. Today's date. What is it? It's... He paused, like he was trying to remember something important. It's night shift. That's not an answer. That's not even close to an answer. Thomas, what's your last name? Another long pause. Thomas. Thomas? Thomas? Yes. Where do you live? Here. Here? At the gas station? Yes. My blood was getting cold. Thomas, what year is it? He stared at me with eyes that suddenly seemed completely empty. It's work time, he said. That's when I knew for certain that Thomas wasn't human. I don't know what he was. A ghost? A hallucination? Something else entirely. But he wasn't real. At least, not in any way that mattered. Except he was there every night. Helping with work, talking to customers, existing in my world even though the world insisted he didn't exist. I thought about quitting, but I needed the job. And honestly, Thomas was still the perfect coworker. He did his work, didn't cause problems, didn't hurt anyone. So I decided to just accept it. For 3 months, I worked alongside something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it was fine. Better than fine, actually. Until last week. I came to work, and Thomas wasn't there. First time in months he'd missed a shift. I figured maybe whatever force kept him appearing had finally worn off. But around 2 a.m., a customer came in who looked exactly like Thomas. Same height, same build, same forgettable face. But he was wearing different clothes, had a different haircut. "Pack of cigarettes," he said in Thomas's voice. I stared at him. "Thomas? I'm sorry. You're Thomas. You work here." The man looked confused. "I don't work here. I just need cigarettes." I sold him the cigarettes and watched him leave. But something was wrong. He moved differently than Thomas. More naturally. More human. The next night, Thomas was back. But he was different too. More real somehow. He made small talk, told a joke, mentioned being tired. All things the old Thomas never did. "Thomas," I said carefully, "did you do anything interesting on your night off?" "Yeah, actually. Went to a bar across town. Met some people. Had a good time." "Really? What bar?" "Murphy's. Nice place. You should check it out sometime." "Murphy's. That's where the customer from last night said he'd been heading when I asked." That's when I understood. Thomas wasn't just something that wasn't real. Thomas was something that became real by replacing real people. And now he was out there, living someone else's life, being someone else entirely. Someone who'd just been buying cigarettes and was now gone. Replaced by a thing that used to work night shifts at a gas station. I quit the next day. But sometimes I wonder how many Thomases are out there. How many empty, perfect people working jobs, living lives, interacting with families, all while the real people they replaced are just gone. And I wonder if anyone else notices when someone in their life becomes a little too perfect, a little too helpful, a little too much, like exactly what they needed. Because maybe that's when you should start asking questions, before it's too late, before perfect becomes permanent. 6 confessions, 6 nightmares that real people lived through. Sarah, who discovered her landlord's underground prison and ran instead of saving the children trapped inside. Marcus, who worked alongside his dead coworker for 3 weeks and never knew the difference. Jessica, who learned what happens when perfect children become something else after dark. Alex, whose roommate wasn't just studying his life, he was preparing to steal it completely. Rachel, who found out that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who offer us exactly what we need. And David, who worked beside something that wasn't real until it became real by replacing someone else. These stories don't end when the lights come back on. They continue in the dark corners of your mind, in the doubt that creeps in when you're alone, in that moment when you realize you don't really know the people around you as well as you thought. So tonight, when you're lying in bed, listen carefully to the sounds your house makes. Pay attention to how your coworkers act. Notice if your neighbors know things they shouldn't know. Because the truth is, we're all just one confession away from discovering that our normal, safe world isn't as normal or safe as we believed. Sweet dreams. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, like the video. It helps more horror lovers discover our tales. Subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss what's hiding in the dark. Share this video with someone who swears they're not afraid of the dark. Let's test that. And remember, some stories don't end when the lights come back on. This is Dread Dynasty.